Ladies and gentlemen, good evening. My name is Ellen Wasfy of the League of Women Voters of Kent County. On behalf of the League and its co-hosts, the Dover branch of the American Association of University Women, the National Association of the Advancement of Colored People Central Delaware branch, number 2028, the Central Delaware Alumni Council of the Pan-Hellenic Council, and Restoring Central Dover. It is my pleasure to welcome you to a virtual candidates night for 2020. Let me stress that the League of Women Voters is a nonpartisan organization that does not support or oppose any candidate or political party. Tonight's program will afford us the opportunity to hear a discussion of issues and opinions, which will enable us to make more informed choices on Election Day. This evening, candidates for state senator and state representative from Kent County were invited to participate in a forum. However, the League of Women Voters is required to abide by regulations set forth by the Federal Elections Commission, the Federal Communications Commission, and the Internal Revenue Service. These regulations are intended to ensure nonpartisanship by nonpartisan groups sponsoring appearances for candidates running for public office. Consequently, should only one candidate for a particular office be present, even if that candidate is running unopposed, we cannot provide the opportunity for him or her to address the audience as part of the formal debate. There must always be at least 2 points of view represented for each office. This evening, several candidates for state legislature are affected by these regulations and cannot participate in this forum. Senator Jeffrey Spiegelman, Republican from District 11, and Representative William Carson, Democrat from District 28, are running unopposed. The opponent of Ms. Jackie Hugg, Democrat in Senate District 15, declined the invitation to appear, as did the opponent of Representative William Bush, Democrat in Representative District 29. Let us now turn to the format of this evening's debate. The candidates will have 2 minutes for their opening statements, outlining issues of particular importance to their campaigns or their background and experience and so on. The League of Women Voters member, Dr. Phyllis Edamatsu, is she here? Well, hopefully she will be here any minute. And Carolyn Brinkley will act as timekeepers. They will notify the candidates when they have 15 seconds left. She will hold up a sign that says 15 in big black letters. And when their time is up, and the sign will say time. In fairness to both candidates, we request that they observe these time limits. The initial speaking order was determined beforehand through the method of random choice by the League of Women Voters Candidates Night Committee. Following the initial presentations, the candidates will have the opportunity to respond to some questions sent by the public via email prior to tonight's event, and several questions posed by the League of Women Voters on its Vote 411 website. Each candidate will have 1 minute to answer each question and 1 minute for rebuttal if desired, but they are limited to only 1 rebuttal per question per candidate. Both candidates will have the chance to respond to each question, and we ask them to direct their comments to the viewing audience and not to each other. One final word regarding tonight's presentation. Organizing such an event would not have been possible without the conscientious efforts of civic-minded citizens who spend hundreds of hours planning and attending to details. Our gratitude goes to the League of Women Voters Candidates Night Committee, Jean Bauer, Gwen Elliott, and Mary Merritt, who contacted and followed up with the candidates directly. Joan and Fred Bruckelman, who formatted and issued the letters of invitation and debate guidelines to all the candidates. Beverly Jackson, who coordinated candidate responses and fielded questions from the public. And Marianne Coe and Chandra Owens, who contributed their technology skills to enable us to host and publicize this virtual forum. We would also like to recognize Dr. Mary Kay Eggers, President of the League of Women Voters of Kent County, Janet Tomaszewski, President of AAUW, Dover, Ann Smith, President of the Central Delaware Branch of NAACP, Chandra Owens, President of the Central Delaware Pan-Hellenic Alumni Council, and Chanda Jackson, President of Restoring Central Dover, for volunteering their organizations to co-sponsor this event. And now, let me introduce the candidates for State Senate from the 14th District. And when I introduce you, you may have the 2 minutes to make your opening statements, and we welcome them. Our first candidate is Mr. Craig Pugh, Republican. Mr. Pugh.
Hello, and thank you for the opportunity to speak to the League of Women Voters. We haven't had a chance to do a debate forum like this, so it's interesting to enter into this. At any rate, I'll tell you a little something about myself. Much as Senator Ennis, I am a lifelong volunteer fire company member of Lipstick Volunteer Fire Company. Have been for well over 40 years. I've also been the mayor of the town of Lipstick for 18 years, not consecutively. 15 of that was consecutively, but we have served 18 years as a municipal leader here in the small community of the town of Lipstick, which leads me to why we're running and what we think we can bring to the 14th District Senate seat. Small business is one of our priorities in the community that we live in. That type of entrepreneurial independence is the spirit of the land from where we come from. A lot of that has been somewhat degraded through the COVID environment. The other thing is we are a small community. I also come from a small industry where a lot of my predecessors that were my leaders and mentors often told us that we don't really have the ability to move forward because we're so small. So the idea was instilled in me to how, if this is the problem that all my mentors and predecessors have identified, then how do we cure this? So we become mayor. We brought our industry and the people and the families to the municipality. And then we went out to the other municipalities, to the other people that are involved in our industries, and we connected them from Bethany Beach and Lewis, up to Slaughter's Beach, North Bowers, Lipstick, Low Creek, Smyrna, Odessa, Fort Penn, along those shores. That way, when we went to pass legislation, our predecessors' deterrent no longer existed. Instead of walking through our legislative leaders with 100, we walked with thousands.
Thank you, Mr. Pugh. You'll have a chance to continue your ideas during the question and answer period. Senator Ennis, Senator Bruce Ennis, Democrat.
Okay, well, first thing I'd like to do is thank the League of Women Voters and all the sponsors, as well as all who are attending tonight to virtually address you again this campaign season as a candidate for re-election for the State Senate 14th District. It's been my honor, really, and pleasure to serve our community and state for many years. Actually, I have helped people of all ages, of all races, political learnings, and economic status.
We'll find out.
Serving the 14th Senatorial District is actually one of the largest, most diverse senatorial districts. It runs from the Sea of Need Canal, as you know, down to the north end of Dover, particularly east of Route 1. I worked many times on diversity, and the diversity of the district really has guided my particular actions in the legislature. It is a very diverse district. We have a lot of sportsmen, anglers, farmers, and that type of thing. Just to be brief, I won't go into a lot of detail on myself, but the main issues in my campaign is financial responsibility and transparency, farmland preservation, and balanced development. and payment of healthcare costs, continuation of constituent services, which I have a good reputation for, and reform in the criminal justice system, as well as improvement of our education, particularly of children and youth. With that, I'll yield back to the chairman.
Well, thank you very much, Senator Ennis. We will now turn to the questions that have been posed. Either some of them have come in via email, and many of them come from the Vote 411 website of the League of Women Voters. That we have 10 questions for you, and some of them a little bit more complicated. We'll give you a little bit more time to answer them. We'll start out with actually the first 3 questions deal with the election process and how we get to vote and redistricting. So we'll start with the first question. This year, Delawareans can vote by mail due to COVID-19. Would you support continuing the vote by mail option for future Delaware elections? If yes, what modifications would you make to the current mail-in voting process? And we'll start out with Senator Ennis.
Would you support vote by mail?
Okay. That asked me.
Yes.
I'm sorry, if I have a little problem hearing you, I'll let you know.
Do you need me to repeat the question?
Oh, no, I
okay.
understood the question. I would definitely support the no excuse voting on a permanent basis. There's many people out there who unfortunately have a lot of family issues and family work requirements and are not able to get to polls. And I think it's important to give those people that option. The law that we passed, and if any new law is enacted, will also allow for anyone to continue to vote at the polls if they so desire. It doesn't mandate to go to the polls. Of course, likewise, there's a access to the email. So yes, I would support continuation of that legislation.
Thank you, Senator Ennis. Mr. Pugh.
I support mail-in voting as long as we can kind of clean it up. I don't know whether you can read what I have here. I have a piece from the election board that spells my name incorrectly with my address on here. And then I have another one that spells my name correctly with the same address. So how often are these discrepancies taking place in the state of Delaware? It seems to be questionable, at least. So, but I do understand that there are some that are somewhat disabled and prefer the idea of mail-in voting. So with that, I support it, but there must be more justification for how the ballots are released and brought back in. Accounting for that seems to be the ultimate issue with the mail-in ballot. And this is one example of that, which I'm sure that most of us have bumped into other problems such as that. But that's my answer.
Thank you, Mr. Pugh.
Ellen,
Oh,
time.
do you need to rebut, Mr. Senator Ennis? Do you need
I just want to respond to
Sure.
1
minute.
This
1 minute.
particular
1 minute.
vote, no excuse voting opportunity is really a test run, I feel. As a result of this election, particularly the general election, as well as looking at the primary, we will have a good feel of if there is problems and how to correct them in the new legislation. The most important thing I would like to make sure that we don't let people vote too early so they don't get a chance to examine the candidates and who they stand for. Thank you.
Thank you, Senator Ennis. Shall we move on to the next question, gentlemen? The next question deals with a piece of legislation that is out there right now, and it has to do with early voting. So I will read the question and then you will have a chance to respond. The Delaware General Assembly passed HB 38 and HB Amendment 1, an act to amend Title 15 of the Delaware Code relating to early voting. This act will allow early in-person voting in Delaware on at least 10 days before an election. This bill would take effect in 2022 after passing a second time in the 2021 legislative session. Would you support this legislation? And we'll start out with Mr. Pugh.
Well, I agree with Senator Ennis's statement about allowing enough time for people to get the information before the election. I think that's a valid statement, and we're on that. As far as the 10 days before, it doesn't appear to me as though we have the logistics or the funding, the budgeting to make that available. So I guess the polling places that we would ordinarily be using, as we will be using at this election, may be discarded for that reason. So it sounds as though if you wish to early poll or vote, then you'll have to go to somewhere different than what you're apparently used to from past experience. But so the knowledge of the candidates is probably the biggest deterrent. I don't think at this time I've heard enough to support that.
Thank you, Mr. Pugh. Senator Ennis.
Thank you, Ellen. I would support that legislation allowing for early voting. And I believe I would be more than happy to include additional days, up to 30. The reason for that, is simply because that gives individuals plenty of time to see the platform of the candidates and to try to match it up with their desires and vote accordingly. But yes, I would support it and would vote for an extension of it as well.
Thank you, Senator Ennis. The next question also deals with the election process. Do you have a rebuttal, Mr. Pugh? Did you want to say something?
Yes, I do.
Please go ahead.
If we were to move back as far as Senator Ennis suggested, the 30 days, that would certainly bump into our primary periods. We'd run up against that, and that would be more red tape that we'd have to go through to change that. I guess that would be part of the legislation. But I don't oppose backing up our primaries, the earlier times in the year, but at this time, that's not available to us.
Thank you, Mr. Pugh. All right, we'll move on now. And this also deals with voting, but it has to do with redistricting, how we set up the areas that in which you vote, the boundaries. The question is, following the 2020 census, election district boundaries will be redrawn across the country. Do you think Delaware would benefit from having an independent redistricting commission? And please explain your position. And we'll start out with Senator Ennis this time.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. I would definitely be in support of having an independent redistricting committee. In fact, I was on the last bill that really went nowhere. It was sponsored by Senator Blevins, if you remember.
Did she say what?
This issue comes up every election, and I'm full support because the reason I am in support, it would give more opportunity, for the senators, for regular citizens to participate in this process, and would give more accountability to the system. Thank you.
Thank you, Senator Ennis. Mr. Pugh.
Gerrymandering is, as Senator Ennis stated, always a constant issue with boundary disputes and lines as our census changes. I find it very, very hard to believe that we can find what you say is an independent commission to look at this unless we go outside of the state, outside of its boundaries. Then we may be able to find some sort of resource to help that. But within the state itself, I believe we are too conflicted and too divisive in order to think that we can conduct this so-called independent survey. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Pugh. Moving on to our next question. We are moving on to a totally different topic at this time, and it has to do with law enforcement. So the fourth question is, if elected, what measures will you develop and or support to increase community confidence in law enforcement personnel? And we'll start out with Mr. Pugh this time.
Well, I am in favor of the police force. I'm in favor of the Department of Corrections. I'm in favor of probation and parole. I don't wish to defund any of these programs. And what I've just named to you is from capture to incarceration to exiting the correction system. Those people and those employees are ultimately very important. They risk their lives on a daily basis to protect ourselves in the communities. Defunding the police eliminates protection from the victims that are preyed upon by criminals. So it would be my ultimate support is to support and to back the police and the other systems that lead the incarceration units to its end. If anything, we should develop more programs to help those that are in prison and have good time to be able to learn skills, so when they are able to enter into the job force, they can be productive citizens on a level where they can build their own respect and build that back into the communities. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Pugh. Senator Ennis.
I'd just like to say that, as you know, I attended the event at Legislative Hall sponsored by the Legislative Black Conference, who were there in regard to ending systematic racism. In our grant and aid bill this year, it's one of the last bills we pass, as you know, each year, there was specific language that created 2 task forces. And these task forces are made up of a cross-section of stakeholders. One deals with the African-American issue, and the other one deals with police racism reform. And they are meeting presently, both of them, and they are to come back after they review, study, and they will make recommendations to the General Assembly. Now, I think it's important to have this done first by them because they are the stakeholders. And I'm anxious to see their report, and I'm willing to work with our Black Caucus and other members of the legislature and the community to try to find out what the issues are and help to resolve them. Thank you.
Thank you, Senator Ennis. The next question is on a related topic. It has to do with racial inequality in this country and how we deal with it. And so the 5th question is, how do you believe that racial inequality can be reduced or eliminated in Delaware? So we're getting very specific, state specific here. So we'll start out with Senator Ennis this time.
And thank you. I think this can very well be handled. I believe that it can be reduced, eliminated, very simply by establishing agency policies and laws governing all forms of inequities that may turn up and actions that infringe on the people as a whole. Now, this will ensure that everyone will be treated with the same dignity and respect. The first step is to bring these stakeholders together, as I mentioned first of all, to review, study, and determine the findings for recommendations so we can make those changes if necessary.
Thank you, Senator Ennis. Mr. Pugh.
Attack this from a different direction. And I think we need to attack this from the teaching that we enter into with our children and some of the curriculums that are provided to them to instruct them in their inclusion into our society. Knowledge is the power of advancement. So if we are told bad things about ourselves, then we generally produce bad things back out. So my idea is to uphold the good events, the ones that are brought to us through disparity and pain and struggle, more so than what the environment is that we are subjected to today. And one example of that would be the Civil War Reconstruction period. I thought was a more disparity, more economic strife, and more struggle, especially for the Black community. They, however, had many leaders that advanced out of that. In 1874, Robert Elliott was elected to the House of Representatives and helped lead his race and was proud to do so through this period and added articles of amendment to our Constitution. This story is little known of this struggle and strife, but is a proud moment that most of us should know on a historical level. Reconstruction provided not just Robert Elliott, but many great leaders that performed under great struggle and strife. And that is inspiring to me, and hopefully would be inspiring to those young people that could hold those values as their own. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Pugh. Moving on to a completely different topic now, climate change. How do you feel climate change has affected life in Delaware? What steps, if any, should be taken to lessen the effects of climate change? And we'll start out with Mr. Pugh this time.
Okay. Climate change has affected me somewhat personally. I worked as a waterman on the Delaware Bay. I have for 40 years. So the changes in the environment, as far as our fisheries go and our waterways, has impacted me through those 40 years. We've seen some advancements of some species because of it, which is to our benefit, and then some decline. So there are some good things, and then there are some bad things. One of the better things has been our crab industry has been able to survive very well in the Delaware Bay. I think because of the warmer temperatures, especially when the winter times. Generally, winters can destroy populations of our blue crabs, which is our largest fishing industry in the Delaware Bay that I can speak to, and I don't believe there is another leader at our General Assembly that has as much experience or could apply that much experience to the General Assembly. I'd be happy and proud to do that. Other things is tidal influence seems to be increasing, and that certainly couples with flood insurance and those pains. So there are some good things, there are some bad, but we struggle through it. I guess the best part of it is it doesn't take over in a day. It doesn't really take over in 10 years. It slowly advances, so we must be able to recognize and advance with that type of prioritization. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Pugh. Senator Ennis.
Thank you. As you know, this issue of climate change has been an issue before General Assembly and even the Congress, simply because temperatures have risen. Now, it's true that the temperature has risen only a small amount, but we have to look after those that follow us. We have to look after those children and their children and their children. So I don't think it's too late to address this climate change issue that is out there. There are a lot of scientists that say there is no issue with climate change. There's others that say there is a problem. But I think it's important that we address this issue, and that we can see in Antarctica and other places, and even here in Delaware, indications that the climate has in fact increased. And many feel that a lot of fossil fuels and certain energies are creating some of the problems. Thank you.
Thank you, Senator Ennis. The next question deals directly with a point that both of you just made. It has to do with renewable energy. Let me read the question. What is your stance on renewable energy for Delaware, and specifically the Renewable Portfolio Standard, or RPS, which is a regulation that requires the increased production of energy from renewable energy sources such as wind, solar, biomass, and geothermal? And we'll start this time with Senator Ennis.
Well, thank you. As you know, we had, I think it was late Senate Bill 250, as I recall, that was introduced late in the session. And the session which we didn't even attend for the most part because of we only attended virtually. And I didn't support that bill. Well, surprisingly, my name turned out to be on the bill. But when the backer came around, I never asked to be on it. When the backer came around, I wouldn't sign it. That means you're not on the bill, whether even your name's on there or not. But I do support the Renewable portfolio system. But I want that system to promote the use of green energy over the use of fossil fuels and attain a goal that can be met. But the main thing I'm concerned about, I want to make sure that there's a cost cap enforced so that the consumer of the utility is not overburdened with charges because it's green energy. The last bill, I think, does not address that issue, and I would not support it. And I would support any bill in the future that would not be fair to the utility user. Thank you.
Thank you, Senator Ennis. Mr. Pugh.
I would answer this to how it affects the quality of life in the community that I come from. And you know, technology today, here we are on Zoom doing a conference with one another, and that a wonderful thing. So it's, you know, kind of exposed itself to prime time. The power issue, on the other hand, has not shown itself ready for prime time. That type of technology, as it advances out, will possibly and probably will be ready for prime time. But this time, in our community, I know when we bump into northeast storms, whether it be ice storms, hurricanes, rainstorms, these are the critical times that we need our power. And that power must be dependable in order to ensure the safety of the citizens that live in my community. And that is what I will uphold. As long as that dependability is there, then I will be in support of that. That is the key issue for the citizens of the 14th district, in my mind. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Pugh. Our next question is on a totally different topic. It's access to information. Delaware's Freedom of Information Act, is it working well for the public? What changes, if any, would you suggest for FOIA or the Freedom of Information Act? And we'll start out with Mr. Pugh on this one.
I've had some experience with a FOIA. It was, I think it's 10, 12 years ago since I did a little practice with the FOIA. For me, it was a learning function, to say the least. Your specificity, you must be very specific as to what you ask for. And it was, apparently that slows down the process if you paint with a broad brush. So the learner, as they go through this, must learn to be very, very detailed in what they ask for in order to get the correct information back out of the system. So it has its value. It's shown its value to me in the past. It is cumbersome, I understand. But a lot of people are asking for a tremendous amount of information. But learn to be very, very pinpointed and specific with that in order so it will lead you down the path that you desire.
Thank you, Mr. Pugh. Senator Ennis.
The question I heard was that you asked whether the system, the Information Act, is working well in Delaware, and if not, what changes I would recommend. The system is not working well in Delaware now, particularly in view of the COVID-19. I've had people say they requested freedom of information requests, only to be told that they would not get it to 25 days after the emergency ended, the pandemic ended. So it is not working well. When you talk about freedom of information, I have to go back to one of the bills, one of many bills I sponsored, dealing with community right to know. And that's where the various chemicals information is made available to emergency service people and also the public who request it to know what chemicals exist in plants in their area. I support those bills. In fact, I'm sponsored most of them and currently serve on the State Emergency Response Commission. So I would move to do more to make it a more impactful Freedom of Information Act. Thank you.
Thank you, Senator Ennis. The next question is a very interesting one. It has to do with your philosophy of legislating. So let's see what somebody asked. Can you give an example where your own views or vote on an issue would differ from your party's official platform. How do you balance loyalty to your party, your donors, your constituents, and your own conscience when they conflict? Let's try Senator Ennis on this one.
Sorry.
Thank you. You can hear me okay? There are many requests made by constituents, and fortunately, many of them are great ideas and get the support of the legislature. But many of them cost money. But I've been noted to stay with the bill once I get on it. It took me 6 years to get the paramedic legislation. It took 3 years for me to get the price and light on school buses. And took 4 years to get rent justification for manufactured homeowners. But what we do when we receive information from individuals or organizations that have took a piece of legislation, we talk to people on the committees that represent that issue. And we try to bring support. And then we introduce the bill and have sponsors, House and Senate. So I don't have a problem, with the issue of constituents contacting legislators and trying to get their legislation passed for them. Thank you.
Thank you, Senator Ennis. Mr. Pugh.
Yes, this is fairly easy for me. It's not unusual in our leadership in the community I come from for us to take issue with one another. But the struggle is to find where those opinions lie and poll those people that are directly affected, as Senator Ennis referred to them as the stakeholders. They are the most important function of this. Not necessarily our issues or our views. I've been told by many political leaders that they were elected to a certain position because the electorate thought that they knew the issues best. I highly disagree with that. Those politicians, or generally politicians, I will never agree with. There have often been times in our little town where we have made decisions that I did not necessarily agree with, especially at the start of it. But if that's the direction that people wish to travel and wanted to head, then then we weigh that out and we head that direction. And it's if we do head that direction from past experience, I've found if some of that does make a mistake, it's easier to fix. It's easier to tweak that and make that a positive action for everybody in the community, because nobody's really pointing a finger at you and saying, "I told you so. I told you so." It's more of a community effort and a community cause to go forward in certain action. So it is much easier to repair that action if it has issues as we go along. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Pugh. Senator Ennis, rebuttal. Did you want to say something? You need to
I
unmute.
just want to make a quick comment.
Okay.
Mr. Pugh is fully aware that we work together on this along with other legislators. He and a number of fishermen came to the General Assembly with complaints about DENREC and their enforcement. They weren't even handed on their enforcement. So we had a meeting, and from last I heard from the meeting, which is some time ago, DENREC is more cooperative now with the fishermen, particularly in the Lipstick area. He also had a number of bills that we got passed that dealt with watermen. Interesting to say, not only will I the prime sponsor with two other sponsors, but I floor managed most all those three bills individually, with one exception in the Senate, because I'm the chairman of the Delaware Sportsman Caucus, and chairman, of course, of that allows me to floor manage the bills. So the other thing is that most people know that it makes no difference what I think about an issue. I vote the majority of my constituents. The district is very diverse. But I try to vote, and in most cases do vote for, with the majority of my constituents, regardless of what party I'm from.
Thank you, Senator Ennis. Now we come to our final question, which is the question, the way it's phrased is more like a closing statement and another area where you can expound on your philosophy of legislating. What motivated you to seek or continue in this office? It's a very broad question and it'll give you 3 minutes to answer it. Oh, I'm sorry. We'll start out with Mr. Pugh.
All right, I'd like to, I guess, start out where I left off in my beginning statement. That was what I was trying to express to you was we come from a small community, a small industry. We support small business and the families that are supported by that. They are the web of connectivity and the glue, so to speak, that keeps us all alive and waking up happy to be with one another each and every day. The positive thing that came out of this was close to the last question, was that when people came to us with issues, there was never a label. There's never been a label. And hopefully that I've been probably labeled more with this run for Senate than as much as I ever have been. But at any rate, as we have worked with the community, that's never been an issue. What is the key is the unity that is formed between the other municipalities, and that I know that I can bring forth to the 14th district, is that alignment between the municipalities, that commonality that we have, and that connective glue of the small business people. COVID itself should not rule our lives. We should rule over COVID. I say back to work, back to church, back to school. Our constitutions should never go on vacation. These liberties and freedoms were the cost of many lives, and some paid the ultimate price. These values, small business, ownership, property ownership, prosperity, freedom of religion, and the right to defend ourselves. These are the values that bind our hearts and minds as we raise our children in an independent society. Please teach your children as if their independence and freedom depended upon it. And thank you for this opportunity.
Thank you very much, Mr. Pugh. Senator Ennis.
Thank you, once again. I make no apologies for the fact that I ran 13 times for the House seat, and I got elected all 13 times. And this will be the 4th opportunity in the Senate that I've run for re-election. So I make no apologies there. But I feel, being previously a member of the state police, where you help folks out there, the citizens, that to be in a legislature and working on their behalf is extension of that help. My years of law enforcement, I think, have given me a better understanding of the situation confronting our state and the nation. And most recently, due to the death of George Floyd and other tragic incidents, we need to find ways to make things better. I feel that the road ahead is not going to be easy, but it can be done. And if ever an experienced legislator was needed, I think this is the time. That's why I ran for re-election. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Senator Ennis. We have now come to the close of tonight's program. Let me thank both the viewing public and the candidates for your involvement in this learning experience. Our gratitude also goes to the League of Women Voters, AAUW, the Central Delaware NAACP, the Panhellenic Council, and Restoring Central Dover for supporting this example of grassroots democracy. These debates can be accessed on the League websites and Facebook on Friday, October 23rd. Please note that the Kent County League's next virtual debate will take place tomorrow, including additional candidates for Delaware State Representative. The following day, we will hold a virtual forum for Kent County Levy Court candidates and from District 1, 3, and 5, and Kent County Clerk of the Peace. The League of Women Voters of Delaware will present a virtual candidate debate for U.S. Senate and U.S. Representative next week on October 29th, and for Governor, Lieutenant Governor, and Insurance Commissioner on October 20, that was October 28th, and this one will be October 29th. Please send in your candidate questions to kcdelwv@gmail.com. These debates will be recorded using Zoom. No public will attend. Recording of these events may not be used without the express approval of the League of Women Voters. The League will only allow audio and/or video of this forum to be broadcast in its entirety, except by media reporting on the event. Audio and video of the federal and statewide debates will be streamed on League websites and Facebook on Friday, October 30th. And most importantly, please remember to vote by Tuesday, November 3rd. Thank you and good night. Thank all of you.
Thank you, lady.